Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. I know it's a very busy time of year. We have our sports season finally in full swing. Town elections are in 2 days, so I appreciate your willingness to come out, sit and listen and engage with what I think is a really good panel of speakers tonight to talk about potential marijuana sales in the town of Abington. Marijuana has an extraordinarily complicated public policy issue. There are significant public safety, public health, criminal justice, substance abuse, taxation, land use, and banking implications, just to name a few. Let alone the fact that marijuana is still considered illegal according to the federal government. We are essentially watching the creation of a multi-billion-dollar, multifaceted industry from scratch. And as you're going to hear shortly from a couple of our speakers, there are still a lot of moving parts and uncertainties. New regulatory structures are being put in place, and new language entering our civic vernacular, such as community of disproportionate impact and local host agreements. This has been a complex issue even for those who handle these types of things on a full-time basis. So it's only natural that for the rest of us, we would have some questions and uncertainties as well. The goal of this forum is to try and provide some clarity, learn about the new rules, and get your questions answered. And hopefully all of this will be done in a positive, constructive manner that remembers at the end of the day, we are all neighbors and we all have the best interests of our community at heart. So let's begin. Just to quickly set the stage, Massachusetts voters approved retail marijuana sales at the ballot box in November 2016. Abington voted in favor of it at the time, 53-47. For the past 9 months, the Cannabis Control Commission has been working hard to establish a new oversight and regulatory system. One of the commissioners is Jennifer Flanagan, who is with us tonight. She served in the Mass House of Representatives from 2005 to 2009 and the Mass State Senate from 2009 to 2017. While in the Senate, she spent time as co-chairwoman of the Joint Committee on Mental Health and Substance Abuse and helped champion multiple new laws combating prescription drug and opioid abuse. So please join me in welcoming Commissioner Jennifer Flanagan.
Thank you. Sorry, it took a long time to get up here. The school is massive. So thank you for being here this evening. I know that there are a lot of questions throughout the state. Usually my presentation is 45 minutes long. Today I've been told I have 10 minutes, so I'm going to give you the very abridged version. I will tell you that from start to finish, 5 commissioners had been appointed back in August, and we came together September 1st of 2017 to begin the process of regulating adult use of marijuana in Massachusetts. We had a very condensed timeline. One, I think most people are surprised that we're reaching our benchmarks. And quite frankly, I can't thank the staff and the other commissioners enough for the work that we've been doing around the clock to ensure that we get this done in a timely fashion and we get this done fairly. I know that there are very questions regarding communities. Some communities are in favor of this, some communities are not. At the present time, I believe there's over 180 communities considering bans or moratoriums, whether it's their town warrant or before their city council. I will tell you, we will have a better idea after the town meeting season ends as to what communities are doing what, but we don't have an official list of what everyone's going to allow in their towns as of yet. To begin with, I will tell you that we are in the middle of the licensing process. We're in the early stages of that. April 1st, we began our certification applications for priority applicants, which were really your registered marijuana dispensaries and your economic empower applicants. On April 15th, we began accepting applications for certification for priority applicants. On May 1st, we're going to open up applications for the cultivation, microbusiness, craft cooperatives, independent testing labs, and transport licenses. And on June 1st, we're going to open applications for the retail and the product manufacturers. Now, having said that, you are considered a disproportionately affected community according to the report that we had done, and there are 29 around the state. That means that the applications will be looked at more swiftly. And quite frankly, that means that people applying for these licenses will be able to have technical assistance that we'll have up and running so people are able to engage in this business and be part of this industry. The public health aspect of it, we are being very cognizant of the fact that this is still a scheduled drug according to the federal government. As with all of you, I wake up every day wondering what our president is going to do and what our attorney general is going to say. But here in Massachusetts, we've been assured by the governor and by the colonel of the state police that we are moving forward with this industry. So you will see us continue to move forward regardless of what's been going on in the federal government. Oftentimes, we get asked what our role is in the state versus the communities. And I will tell you that as a former senator, I've heard time and time again how the state comes in and tells communities what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and where to do it. That's not the case with regulated adult use of marijuana in Massachusetts. And when I talk about adult use, I'm not talking about the medicinal program. I'm talking about the question that was passed in 2016 on the ballot. And what we have seen is that we want to have a partnership. So the municipalities have a large role to play in this. You do have a say as to where these sites could be located, the types of facilities that can come into your community, in the community host agreement. You'll often hear about the community host agreement. That is the contract between the business owner and the municipality, essentially how they're going to help cover the cost of what it's going to cost for people to be here. To be very blunt with you and very honest with you, I will tell you that there are social costs. There are costs. You will have, and you can ask your fire and police department, you can ask your superintendent here tonight. People are using this substance who don't necessarily know how to. And that's leading to 911 calls, that's leading to our young adults using and having experiences from it, that's leading to people being on our main streets, smoking outside. There's a lot of confusion about the law. And so the community host agreement is an opportunity for your town officials, whoever's negotiating that agreement, to say, listen, this is how much we think it's costing, this is what we want for it, and we want to partner with you. I've told many businesses that I've talked to become part of their chambers. They're going to come into our cities and towns, whether it's yours or those around you. We want them to be good business owners, just like any other industry here in Massachusetts. So the community host agreement is a big piece of that. Without that community host agreement, a business cannot get licensed by the state. We need to ensure that they've gone to the municipality in good faith and that they've negotiated their community host agreement. Second to that is also a community forum. There's a lot of conversation about civic engagement and a lot of conversation about engaging the community members in the city or town in which a business wants to site. We have mandated that there are community meetings that will happen, so the business will come in and basically tell you what their plan is, so that there are no surprises and people have an opportunity to engage with the business owner. A lot of times misinformation creates sort of a stigma or a stereotype that we find that when you talk to the business owners, you'll see that they want to be good partners, they want to be good community members. And it's not something that you should be scared or nervous about. So the community meeting is really a big deal to us too. In the licensing process, we license on the state level anyone that's applying, whether you're going to be a craft cooperative, a micro business, a cultivator, a retail establishment, a laboratory. We have all kinds of licenses, a transport license that people can get. We license them, but the town ultimately decides who comes to their community. So for instance, under the law, under Chapter 55, you are allowed up to 20% of retail establishments based upon the number of liquor stores you have. So whatever number of liquor stores you have, you're allowed up to 20% of that for marijuana establishments. For instance, say you have one license available to you, because some cities and towns are very small, and you have 2 applicants, and both of them get licensed by us. The town gets to decide who ultimately comes to the city. The state's not going to tell you who's coming to your town. That's up to the individuals here in your town. Also, we are going to have a strong enforcement division. We're hiring people, I feel like, weekly. Our office went from 5 people to I think we're at 17 now, which is an improvement for us. But there will be enforcement after these stores and after these facilities are open. We will have investigators that go in and look around and inspect and ensure that things are happening. There will be a secret shopper program for retail to ensure that kids cannot go in there and underage individuals cannot go in and obtain the product. We hope to work with our Board of Health to ensure that things are running smoothly just like any other industry does in your community. There's a couple of other things that I think we can certainly talk about. The fact is that If you are the buffer zones, we have buffer zones in place. This is a beautiful facility. You cannot have a marijuana establishment within 500 feet of this facility. And if this town decides to have a more stringent one, because you already have that on the books for your liquor stores, then you can have the same thing for marijuana at the same time. Personally, I keep pushing people to use the term adult use of marijuana, because when we start to talk about recreation, and I'm sure the superintendent will agree, is that children start to be intrigued by that and they start to inquire a little bit more. We want people to know that this is for people ages 21 and over. We want to limit the diversion. We want to ensure that students are not getting it. And at the same time, allowing adults to use the product as they wish. Having said that, there will be a public awareness campaign here in Massachusetts. We're mandated by law to have 2 public awareness campaigns. One, to inform people about the law, what the do's and don'ts are, and 2, to inform people about drug driving, and that comes from EOPS. So you'll see multiple things on the social media, they'll be on the radio, TV, internet. That's going to be coming in the coming months. So what we're trying to do on the state level is be very balanced about this, and be very level-headed and try to also engage people in having conversations. The one thing I can say, especially as a former senator, is that we have tried to engage people across the Commonwealth since the inception of the commission. We have gone out multiple times across the Commonwealth to have public hearings. We've gone out for public comment. We've allowed public comment through mail, through email. People have come and presented before us. So the regulations really is the culmination of a lot of work and a lot of input from people across the Commonwealth, from the Berkshires down to the Cape. I think my time, I'm good. You want me to take questions? I can take some questions if you want. Usually my presentation is like a half hour to 45 minutes, so I'm not going to bore you with all the details if there is something specific that you would like to know. Yes? Whoever you designate in your town, whoever would normally negotiate that. The state doesn't determine who that person is or who those people are. I don't know who would be here.
We have a town manager, we have a board of selectmen, so I imagine it could be a mixture of the 2 outside community people as well.
Yes.
I was actually going to ask a similar question. Is there a model host agreement?
There is not a model host agreement. Each city and town is different, and we've yet to put out a model community host agreement because we think that would sort of intervene in the conversation that happens between a community and the independent business owner. Yes. So there was a report that was done. The question was, what is a disproportionately affected community? There was a report that was done that's online, by the way. MassCannabisCommission.com is our website. And under a number of categories, whether it was economics, it was unemployment rates, it was incarceration rates, or arrest rates, and there's a couple other ones. 29 communities were deemed the most disproportionately affected by the drug laws. And so we have those up on our website, and Abington is one of them. So because of that, people here who are looking to open up businesses will get technical support. They'll get some help. It's sort of a way, I think, under the law to help the towns that have been disproportionately affected by that, who they feel as though has had such negative consequences over the years with the drug laws, to try to help them get into this industry and to help the economics again back in the town. I will tell you that I am in the interesting position in Massachusetts of being the only person who voted no on the question, yes on the law, and is now regulating this. So I can tell you that we took a lot of effort to ensure that people of Massachusetts benefit from this, and not necessarily everybody from the other states that have already legalized marijuana to come in to our state and to sort of open up shop. So a lot of things you'll see, like in the craft business or the micro business, you have to be a resident of Massachusetts of 12 months or more. We want to make sure we have leadership ratings, that if you employ so many people from Massachusetts, you can get a leadership rating. We've done a lot of different things to ensure that people of Massachusetts benefit by this, because truly there will be some economics to this. You know, there's been projections, which I think are going to change once we find out who exactly is going to allow it in their towns and who doesn't allow it. But there's projections to be almost billions of dollars. And if you look at Colorado, they've had to build it up over the years. We want to make sure here in Massachusetts that we're within our borders, people are going to be able to benefit from this.
If I could just ask one question, could you explain a little bit more about the different types of establishments that are allowed, both from the commercial and industrial side as well?
Sure. So we have multiple types of marijuana establishments, and I always forget one, so I've started taking my list with me. We have the cultivators, which are the people that are going to grow it. And there are different tiers of cultivators, so you don't have to necessarily be the big box type cultivator. We do have smaller tiers that people will be able to participate in. We also have the craft marijuana cooperative, which is the smaller scale. They're limited liability corporations. Those are if you think about craft brewers, this is sort of the same type of thing. We have the product manufacturers, which is mostly manufacturing different products. We have the marijuana retailer, which is the stores that are going to sell it. We've got the transporter. We need people to move this stuff around. So we have people that have to be licensed to be a transporter. Research facilities. Here in Massachusetts, we are thriving on data. We want all kinds of data. We want to be able to research different types of things in this industry, so we're allowing for the research facilities. We have laboratory licenses. There's two different kinds, whether it's independent or standards to testing laboratories. The one thing I will tell you is that when we talk about marijuana from the government, is that we are going to test this. We are going to track it from seed to sale. So you can be guaranteed that people are going to have this stuff tested, and we ensure that there aren't all of the pesticides and all of the particles in it that are unhealthy for people. We don't want people getting sick. And right now, what you're getting on the street, you can't guarantee that it isn't laced or it doesn't have certain carcinogens in it. We also have the micro businesses. Those are the smallest type of businesses, I think, that people are really going to get into. We've heard time and time again that this is an expensive business, and I will tell you the security is expensive. We want this stuff secure. And I don't apologize for the fact that it costs money to secure this product, because we think it's that important. But those are the types of licenses that we're currently going to issue. There are also two other types of licenses. The social consumption license, which is, you heard us talk about months ago, which is on-site consumption, sort of like the cafes and the bars that you hear about, and delivery. Those have not been approved yet, and we're supposed to go back in a couple of months to talk about it, and there's no guarantee that they will be approved. But those are two other possible licenses that, if it passes the commission, could be approved to have people licensed here in Massachusetts. Yes?
If you could come use one of the microphones, that'd be terrific.
My question is about the 3% tax.
Mm-hmm.
That tax is to be used to offset any expenses based up because of the marijuana business. What if the expenses are much lower than what is generated? What happens to that extra money? Does it just get folded into the general fund, or does it have?
No, it stays in the town. It's in the town. So what happens is we have the different taxes that are going to happen. The 3% tax, if the town approves to go up the extra 3%, that will come back to the town. The other portions of the taxes in Chapter 55, and I don't have the list with me, there's a number of places that money's going to go before it hits the general fund. I know there's the social behavioral area where the legislature can put money in. There's the marijuana trust, and there's all kinds of things. So the 3% would just be for the town. Eventually.
I'm assuming that that is the money that the state's getting, am I correct?
The intake of income.
So how much is projected to a community that has one shop?
We don't know yet. Because it's not that you have one shop, you're getting a certain amount of money. Everyone who's going to open up shops, and that's why I said after the town meeting season happens, we'll know more as to who has moratoriums and who has bans and who's allowing these types of facilities, because the only taxes are coming from the retail stores. So if you ban retail, but you're allowing cultivation, you're not going to get the tax. We won't know how much is going to be projected until after we find out, because I think what happened was when question 4 passed and when chapter 55 passed the legislation, no one expected 177 or 180 communities to come out and question whether or not they wanted to allow retail in their city. So the projections are changing. But it's not that you only have one shop, you're only getting a certain amount of money. Part of this goes to the general, it's like the lottery. Part of it will go to the general fund and it'll be distributed out to the cities and towns across the board. So even cities and towns who do not have a retail store will get some of the money that comes from this. And of course, my friends in the legislature have had people go to them and say, well, if you don't have the store, you shouldn't get the money. That's probably not going to happen.
Right, so most of the money that we'll be receiving will be from the state, when we have a shop.
Yes.
So this seems like I'm sorry, you want to have?
Similar question to one of the previous speakers, the ability of a local community that has a shop to earmark specific revenue for specific purposes, short of some other legislative act. For instance, if the community wanted to earmark through its host community agreement for public safety purposes specifically, can that be done through a host community agreement?
That would have to be through the host community agreement. I don't think you can, and the attorney from KP Law can tell you, I don't think you can earmark a certain percentage of that 3% to go towards a particular area. But if you wanted in your community host agreement to say, they're gonna put X amount of dollars away to our local charity, you could do that. Or if they're gonna put it to schools, or if they're going to put it towards public safety or, you know, a new public safety building, that has to be negotiated through the public.
The tax itself couldn't be earmarked per se.
No, not from my understanding. So there's the biggest thing about this is that, you know, a lot of the question is, what are we going to gain from this, right? And what are we going to lose from this? And I've been asked this in every single town that I've been to. The one thing you're going to lose if you don't have a retail in your community is taxes. You have the ability to have the extra 3%. If you decide to have it, then that's fine. You're going to get the money anyway. But if you decide to ban retail and say, we don't want any of that here, you're still going to get the social effects from this. You're still going to get people that misuse it. You're still going to, until they start to learn, you know, responsible use. You're still going to get, you know, the cops having to police downtown. You're still going to have to get the school department figuring out what to do with the kids in the schools, because the high schools right now are having a big problem with marijuana usage with edibles. I mean, there are kids coming into school with candy and with vapes and everything else. You're still going to get all that. You're just not going to get the economic benefit from having the facility in your community. So I had a gentleman last night in Quincy tell me, well, if we just ban it, we're not going to have to worry about it. That's not the case. It's the same thing for alcohol. If you don't have a liquor store in your town, it still doesn't mean that people aren't going to drink. They're still going to come in, you're still going to have the effects of that. So that's really the one thing that separates allowing a retail to come in versus banning retail. I will tell you that for many of you, since we're sitting in a school, you might be concerned with, well, what about the advertising? You know, what about when I walk down the street with my, you know, 6-year-old, what are they going to see? If you look at our regulations, which is over 100 pages of riveting reading, because my colleagues have done a great job, we don't allow them to have all these grandiose types of advertising. We limit them just like alcohol, and we limit them even a little bit more because they're not allowed to use the marijuana flower. They're only allowed to have the neon lights within a half hour of dusk. They're not allowed to put anything on their logo, and they're not allowed to give to charities that are targeted to children. The edibles can't be things that children would be attracted to. We've done all of that. And a lot of it's mandated by Chapter 55, but we even went a little bit further than that. So if you have and if I suggest you Google some of the places that are in other states to see what their regulations are like. We're very strict in our regulations to the point that we've been criticized for them, and that's fine. And I think the best indication is that we're being criticized from the advocates and we're being criticized by the industry. So if everybody's mad at us, we must be doing something right. And that's where I think we've done a very good balance of balancing the needs of families and kids, but balancing the needs of the industries and adults that want to participate and use this product. Other questions?
Commissioner Flanagan hopefully can stick around for a few more minutes. I think this is a great opportunity to, let me go to the microphone so I don't get yelled at. This is probably a great breaking point to jump to. Thank you very much, Commissioner Flanagan. That was terrific and very helpful. This is probably a good point to jump to our next speaker, who is Jim Borghesani, who is the Massachusetts spokesman for the Marijuana Policy Project. Jim was also the spokesman for the Yes on 4 ballot question, and he brings an important perspective to this discussion regarding economic impacts. So I'm very grateful that he can join us tonight. Please welcome Jim. He's going to take just a quick moment to set up a presentation.
Thanks, Rick. May not be so quick. There we go.
While Jim is setting up, just a quick reminder, if anyone needs to use the men's or ladies' room, there's one. If you go out the main entrance in the back here, there's one down the hall to the left. There's also, if you go out this way, there's a main corridor down the back, and there's facilities down there as well if you need to.
And if I can get rid of that. Just got to figure out how to get rid of that. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. Bear with me. I'm sorry. Here we go. I just wanted to start with a quick overview of the law. Again, thank you, Rick, and thank you, everybody, for coming. I think it's a very important subject, and it's great to see people getting involved to think about how they want to approach this. The law, as passed by voters and then revised by the legislature, allows adults to possess a limited amount of cannabis. This is not unrestrained legality. Unlike a liquor store, you can't go in and buy, a liquor store, you can go in and buy 40 bottles of vodka if you want. You're limited to the amount of cannabis you can buy. You're limited to how much you can have on your person and how much you can have in your house. Oh my God, it's showing up again. Commissioner Flanagan talked about the Cannabis Control Commission that was created by the law. All cannabis products will be tested. That's the good thing about legality. And I would revise a little bit what Rick mentioned earlier about creating a new industry. We're not creating a new industry. We're converting an existing industry that has been dominated by criminals who sell untested products in unsafe locations. We're converting that to legal businesses who will be licensed, who will check IDs, and who will pay taxes. We're not introducing anything to Abington or to Massachusetts that isn't already here. We're just finally realizing that prohibition did nothing except create an illegal market that was dominated entirely by criminals. And we're making that a legal market that's regulated the same way that we regulate other products, like alcohol, like tobacco. You have the power to limit the amount of cannabis facilities in your town. The 20% rule, you can allow, it's not up to 20%. You can limit cannabis facilities to 20% of your existing package store licenses. You can have more if you wish, but as a town, you can limit it to 20%. So hypothetically, if Abington had 10 package stores, which I'm quite sure you don't have that many, you could limit it to 2 cannabis retail facilities, if you wish. If you want to go to 1 or to 0, that would take a vote of, it would take a ballot vote in Abington's case because you voted yes on question 4. So you can limit the number of facilities to 20%. And again, if you want more, you can have more, but you have the power to limit it to that 20% of existing package stores. The total tax, all in, is 23%. That includes the 10.75% excise tax. That's a special tax just on cannabis that goes directly to the general fund. That includes a 6.25% regular sales tax that we pay on anything that we buy in Massachusetts. And the 6% local option, that's made up of 3% sales tax that goes right to the municipality, as long as you approve 3%, and I hope all municipalities do. I don't know why you'd say we want less than 3%. And that assumes the 3% local option, the host community agreement. You can ask for 3% on that also. So a total of 6%. That's gross sales will go to the town. And that 3% for the host community, by the way, that applies to any marijuana enterprise, not just retail. So if you have a cannabis cultivation facility, the gross revenue, the 3% would still come to the town. And again, we heard earlier that the projected start date is July 1st, and the application process is, just starting now. So, forgive me. I'm not sure if a ban is being contemplated in Abington. Is it?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
The next speaker's going to address that.
Well, why we would urge that you vote no on a ban is because, again, all it will do is keep criminals in control of marijuana sales. You're not going to keep marijuana out of Abington. It's always been here. It's been in my town. I live in the South Shore as well. Again, we're converting it into a legal industry that's regulated, that's dominated by businesses that check IDs and pay taxes. You will guarantee that consumers continue to get unsafe product, and they will go to unsafe locations to buy that product. They get it from people who may sell other dangerous drugs like heroin and opioids. The whole idea is to separate the cannabis consumer markets from the other dangerous drugs that are out there. The other question is revenue. You'd be foregoing a good source of revenue for the town. We're going to get into a little more of the revenue. It's not easy to project revenue, so what we've tried to do is look at existing cannabis sales on the medical side and look at the per capita sales in Colorado and try to impose them on Massachusetts. It's imperfect, but at this point, it gives somewhat of an idea of the type of revenue that's happening in other states and happening in Massachusetts, at least on the medical side. And I'll explain. It's an imprecise comparison, but it's something just to think about. Again, you have the power. You can determine the location, the time, and the manner of cannabis operations. That isn't within the law. That has your power through zoning, through the host community agreements when you talk about the hours that these will operate. I talked about the 20%. You can limit it to 20% of existing package store licenses. You can negotiate your host agreements with 3% of revenue, and so that's added to the 3% straight tax, so you can get up to a 6% tax. You have reasonable restrictions on signage. One thing to think about in cannabis facilities, there's no window displays allowed by law. None. You can't have any product displays. You can't have windows that you can look into and see any product at all. We saw during the campaign, our opponents ran an ad with a shop, that had displays all over the place, product. That was never allowed under the law. It will not be. Your signage will be restricted. You can't use leaf on the signage, any insignia that, that connotates a cannabis plant. You can't have product displays of any kind. In fact, I just want to talk about the security of these facilities. Unlike a package store where you go in and you get your product, you go to the cashier, they check your ID. You will not be able to enter one of these facilities without showing your ID right, and there'll be a vestibule in front with a security officer. You have to show your ID just to even step foot into where the product is. And then you have to show your ID again at the point of purchase. So this is going to be, the security of these establishments are going to be far beyond what we see in liquor stores or in a CVS or a Walgreens where they sell, drugs that can actually kill you. These security procedures are going to be very, very high level and mandated, and we're going to set the standard for the whole country with our security procedures. Again, it's limited to 21 and over. Criminals, the people who have dominated this industry for decades, they didn't care how young their customers were. We want to take the business away from them, finally, and start to actually regulate cannabis in Massachusetts. I want to talk about the revenue. I mentioned this earlier. Again, it's imprecise, but the best we can do is look at existing sales in Massachusetts. Right now, the average medical marijuana facility in Massachusetts does about $7 million per year. That's average. And I know for a fact that Netta in Brookline last year did $30 million in sales. It's a big facility. They do a lot of sales. In Good Health in Brockton did about $10 million in sales. So the average is about $7 million. Remember, that's on a base. That's on a limited consumer base. Only people that hold medical marijuana cards can even go into those stores and purchase. This figure, I think right now there are about 52,000 medical marijuana card holders in Massachusetts. That results, when you look at all of our 351 cities and towns, that comes to 148 people per town who have a medical marijuana card. So you're talking a limited consumer base, but $7 million gross sales was the average for these facilities. That in the 6% tax, remember the local option would be 3% of the local option tax and 3% with your host community. That would generate $420,000 if you use that figure as a possible sales figure. Obviously, the benefits, $420,000 in annual, new revenue to Abington. I don't know what your biggest property taxpayer is in Abington now. In most towns, if there's a big apartment complex, that turns out to be the biggest property taxpayer. Cannabis facilities, in addition to the property tax they're paying, again, this isn't even including property tax. This is just a revenue created through the host community agreement and through that optional 3% tax. The other way to look at it is the Colorado model. Now, what we tried to do here was look at sales in Colorado in 2017. The sales of adult use, not medical, adult use marijuana in Colorado last year was almost $1.1 billion. Now, their population in Colorado was 5.7 million. We have about 800,000 more people, so we're similar sized. We broke down the annual per capita sales in Colorado. Again, that $1.1 billion sales. We broke that down to per capita. So in Colorado, it was an average of $191.22 per capita. Doesn't mean everybody in Colorado purchased cannabis, but the people that did, when you break it down over the population, it came down to about $191, well, exactly, and 22 cents per capita. If you impose that per capita sales on Massachusetts with our population, you get up to $1.24 billion, which is exactly the DOR revenue projection for Massachusetts for 2020. Also exactly the industry, there's an industry analyst group called ArcView. They came out with a projected sales report that had it exactly at $1.2 billion in Massachusetts. Tax revenue at 23%, that's all in, would be about $286 million on that amount of sales. That's for the state. New revenue to the state, $286 million. Again, which is exactly what the DOR, the Massachusetts Department of Revenue, projected for Massachusetts. Now, if you bring that further, and you look at possible revenue for a town like Abington, if you look at the population of Abington, and that's, I think, 2010 census, and we try to look at other towns as well that you might be able to draw customers from if you move forward with a facility here. Weymouth, for instance, Whitman, look at a potential consumer base. You come up to, a little more than 86,000 potential consumers. Doesn't mean there's going to be 86,000 people going to the store, but just using it for a consumer base of people who might be coming in. And looking at that average sales per capita in Colorado, imposing that on potential consumers here, you come up with a facility that does a little more than $16 million per year, potentially. That boosts the potential revenue up to $991,000. Again, imprecise, but just one way to look at it, based on Colorado statistics. And again, that would be the benefits to the town, potentially. Now, what we've seen in other legal states, study after study has shown no increase in youth use. These are state studies. One particular one in Colorado is a nationally recognized study of all, middle school and high school students. We're seeing no increase in use during legality. No increase in motor vehicle OUI deaths or arrests. The 2017 traffic summary report by the Colorado Department of Transportation didn't even mention cannabis as a factor in accidents in Colorado. They talked about distracted driving, an epidemic of distracted driving, and they talked about lack of seatbelt use. Colorado is a state that has secondary enforcement of seatbelts. You can't be pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt in Colorado. You have to be pulled over for another offense, and they can add on a secondary enforcement, a seatbelt use. They didn't even mention cannabis in the wrap-up summary for the highway deaths in Colorado in 2017. We have not seen an increase in public safety budgets. We went through the budget requests in Colorado and other states. They were in line, whether it was a 1% or a 2% increase of all the other safety departments, all the other departments and divisions in state government at all. What we did see is an increase in agricultural inspectors, people who go out and inspect cultivation sites, some safety inspectors. Those positions were paid for by cannabis revenue coming in. We did not see any increase in public safety budgets due to cannabis or any other reason. They were in line with the budget increases that all across in government. And again, substantial new tax revenues in Colorado, and last year it was $247 million. Washington has higher tax rate. They're up to $319 million in new revenue. And Oregon has a much lower tax rate, and their legal sales started halfway through 2017, so they did $60 million. We haven't seen any federal intervention in any of the legal states. Even though it's illegal on the federal level, we haven't seen a single case of the federal government coming in and imposing a law enforcement action against any operator who was complying with the state regulations and complying with state laws. It hasn't happened. Again, this is a study by the Colorado Department of Public Health that shows the pretty much flat youth use in the state. And as a wrap-up, today's unregulated system, which soon will be done in Massachusetts, we have 900,000 adults that use cannabis. That's an estimate by the Senate Special Committee on Marijuana that was formed while the campaign was going on. We have no safeguards on purity or potency or personal security when purchasing because it's always been in the legal market. We've kept it to the criminals. We thought prohibition, well, let's just prohibit it. Well, it didn't prohibit anything. And $900 to $1.2 billion in unregulated, untaxed sales already occurring. Again, we just want to shift those sales and that whole market to a legal market under the complete control of local and state officials. Licensing and store security, you're going to have a safe purchasing environment. Purity testing to make sure that safe product is sold. We've seen all sorts of really, really bad chemicals in street marijuana. Other drugs, fertilizer that shouldn't be used and federally is illegal to use in any product that's meant for human consumption. We see that in street cannabis. Portioning and labeling. We're going to have the most stringent labeling and portioning laws in the nation. Not only will all cannabis be sold in tamper-proof and child-proof packaging, but there will be labels on the product itself, on the packaging, and there will be labels on the product itself. So if you have an edible product, you will see a label saying that it contains THC on the product itself. So we'll do everything possible to make sure that all safeguards are in place. We can't legislate common sense. If parents leave edible, if parents leave, household cleaning materials lying around that their children can get at, it's the responsibility of the parent, no different than any other thing that's in the house that could possibly harm a child. Restricting underage access, again, these stores will be checking IDs much more securely than package stores check IDs. And taxation of all sales. that is my presentation. Just ask you to think about these things as you move forward with how you want to approach this in your town.
So we have plenty of time at the end for questions, but we can take one or two now if somebody has a burning question for Jim. I think, Alex.
You're saying 900,000 people in Massachusetts are using marijuana now.
That's the estimate.
Do you really believe that all 900,000 of them are going to go to a retail establishment to purchase their marijuana, and it's going to put the criminals out of business?
I think that we've seen in other states that there's been a great reduction in black market. When people have the choice of going to a legal facility and looking at product and buying safe, tested product, they do. If they have no choice, they go to the black market.
With the cost of the community host agreement, the packaging, the rent, the insurance, and all the expenses to do it legally, it's still going to be a lot more expensive than buying it off the street. And
It will not. We haven't seen that in any other state. We have not seen the price in the black market be able to compete with the legal market. In no state have we seen that. You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jim. Like I said, Jim's going to be hanging around, so if we have questions at the end, he'll be able to help and answer. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So now we're going to switch our focus to Abington. Technically, the town does not have to take any additional steps, and a retail establishment, once it clears the permitting process, would be allowed to open in Abington by right under state law. Lacking any sort of zoning, it would be treated as a retail establishment and allowed to open wherever we allow retail shops. But as we're about to hear, at town meeting on May 21st, we will be asked to consider a number of possible next steps. And you can read about those steps on the handout that was distributed as you came in. If you don't have one and you'd like to grab one, if you walk out the door, there's a table and there's some sheets on it with some options that will be on the town meeting warrant. And to talk about those options is Alex Bezanson from the Board of Selectmen.
First of all, I want to thank Rick Collins for putting this together. He's been working on this for a little over a month. And thank all the speakers that are going to speak and all the speakers that have already spoken. Just for full disclosure, when I was elected selectman 3 years ago, myself, my wife, and some other residents of Abington created and formed the Abington Substance Abuse Coalition with a mission of bringing early education about the dangers of substance abuse to our children at school. So with that, at a recent selectmen meeting, the 5 members discussed what we should do as a town, if anything, now that it's legal. Like Rick just said, if we do nothing, it's allowed to come to town. It was my stance at that meeting that although 52% or 53%, whatever it was, of Abington voters voted in 2016 to allow marijuana sales in Massachusetts, I'm not convinced 52% of the voters of Abington want it in Abington. So it was my suggestion to the board that we put this on a ballot or on a warrant for town meeting and let the townspeople decide. If the townspeople vote down the article, then retail marijuana will be allowed in town. However, there are several other articles on the town meeting warrant with other restrictions, maybe delaying implementation of this, where it can be located, and I think Rick's going to go over some of that stuff in a few minutes. The Board of Selectmen did not take a vote in favor or against retail marijuana, but I can say, and anyone that watched the meeting, I think it was pretty obvious that 3 selectmen, I think, are in favor of it. 1 is positively against it. and one is still unsure, and that would be me. I like the idea of the revenue, but I'm not convinced it's gonna, everyone, like I just said, everyone's gonna go to the retail store. I don't think that's gonna solve the crime issue of selling illegal marijuana. So I'm urging all of Abington residents to come out to the town meeting and make your voices heard and do your research on it. And I thank all of you for coming. I wish there were a lot more people here tonight, but hopefully people will see this on cable and make an informed decision at town meeting. Thank you. I'll take a few questions if they...
Any immediate questions for Alex? Could you use the microphone just so people watching later?
You said that at town meeting, if people voted for the ban, it would be banned in Abington?
Yes.
My understanding is Abington was a yes town.
Yes.
That means, according to the law, that you have to go to a ballot.
After town meeting, we would have to go to a ballot.
So town meeting wouldn't be the deciding, I just want to...
That's right, yes, that's correct. If we vote to ban it at town meeting, it still has to go to a town ballot.
That's right.
Right.
On this piece of paper, it says, another option is to extend the town existing moratorium.
Yes,
Do we have a moratorium now?
yes. And I believe does it expire June 30th or December? June 30th. It expires June 30th. One of the things that we're discussing now is extending that for another period of time until we really figure this out on what we want. And that was discussed at the last meeting.
I'm going to take this opportunity to pose a question to Town Council, who is here with us tonight, Amy Quessel. The question is in reference to a strategy that some communities have taken, such as Bridgewater, which is to ban retail sales, but to allow commercial operations. So for instance, the grow facilities, the manufacturers, some of the other delivery options. How would that work in terms of the process?
This is a much shorter process.
Yes.
It's the same process, meaning that if you wanted to ban retail sales, you still need to go to town meeting to ban retail sales and to go to the ballot to ban retail sales. However, what you would do is you would have a bylaw, you would propose a bylaw that allowed for example, say if it was cultivation, that would allow for cultivation in certain areas and it would regulate cultivation. So technically, you would be doing some of it.
Okay. So we would need to do a separate town meeting article to do the bylaw to allow the commercial
Right.
side.
And there was one thing that I did want to clear up a little bit, is that it's very confusing, and every town confuses it, is that the fact that there's a 3% tax that is a local option tax that the town can vote at town meeting to buy into. Again, it's like the restaurant tax. The host community agreement, you are allowed to negotiate up to 3% of gross sales. However, it's a community impact fee. In the statute, it is called a community impact fee. It is not a tax. It's also not necessarily guaranteed at 3%. Obviously, the town would try and negotiate up to 3%, but it's not a tax. It's a community impact fee. That's the fee, that the host community agreement, the community impact fee, that has to relate to community impact due to retail sale, due to adult use marijuana. So, for example, a DARE officer, perhaps if you have a huge cultivation operation that's on the outskirts of town, and perhaps you need extra patrols, anything that has to do with diversion, anything that has to do with promoting mental, health due to substance abuse, things like that. But that 3%, say we do negotiate 3%, that 3% actually has to be accounted for. And the governor is actually, there's he's proposed an amendment to the statute to clear up where exactly that fee goes into a special fund or not, so that's in the works.
Thank you very much.
So, just to be clear, the 3% tax and then up to 3% host tax, if you will, the 6%, that is on retail sales and cultivation? Or is it just one?
The 3% tax that you would adopt the statute at town meeting, that 3% tax is only on retail.
Okay,
Now, for a host community agreement, we have to, the town of Abington, if anyone comes in, any license that is issued by the Cannabis Control Commission, so Ms. Flanagan had listed all of the different licenses. If any of those facilities come in to Abington, you have to negotiate a host community
Correct.
agreement. So a cultivator, anyone.
so the most we would get out of that is the 3%, not 6%?
Correct, we would get 3% from the host community agreement for a community impact fee.
Right, okay.
And we would keep that separate because that has to be accounted for.
And only a retail establishment will give us the 3% tax that we could use as we see fit?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in my role as on the planning board, one of the things we have to take in consideration regularly is updates to our zoning bylaws. And one of the things we've been working on is if we choose to allow retail sales in Abington, where should they be? Should they be in our town centers? Should they be on Route 18 in our commercial highway districts? There was an initial proposal to talk about placing an overlay district on Route 123 that we have decided to move away from. As of right now, the article that is on the town meeting warrant would be to create an overlay district, which is basically a zoning district, a special zoning district, in the town's industrial and high-tech zoning districts. And I was hoping to have a map to bring up for you. I'm still fighting with my computer to do so. But what that area is basically is the areas of 18 and Route 58, the northern parts of that where they meet, down to about where the Gioso property is, where they're doing a lot of the storage work for the Route 18 widening project, a little bit north of the ale house. So all of that land that has historically been our industrial land, our high-tech land, that's where we would keep the facilities. One of the reasons we chose that is because it is the area of town with the least amount of residential housing. Technically, the districts don't have any residential housing in them. There are some, residential houses within, a few hundred yards, but for the most part, it is all commercial or industrial land. And then some of the language in it as well regulates the operation of the facilities. I think the hours are like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., so it won't be a late night operation. Again, reaffirming some of the statute, which is on advertising and marketing and having signs in windows. I think we adopt the standard setback of 500 feet from schools and daycares and other sensitive areas. So that will be part of the conversation for town meeting. I do, unless there's a specific question, I'll move on to our next speaker quickly. It is our school superintendent, Peter Schaefer, to talk about the school's thoughts on marijuana in the community.
Thank you, Rick. I'm your school superintendent, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I don't have any surprises for you. Of course, you know what I'm going to say. But let me try to explain why I'm saying it. We should obviously keep this product away from our children. The teenage brain is described as a race car without any brakes, basically. The prefrontal lobe doesn't develop until people are in their mid-20s. The information I bring from you isn't from other states that are ahead of us with the legalization of marijuana. Obviously, marijuana has been legalized for recreational use in Massachusetts. The information I have from you comes from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. It basically outlines studies that indicate that kids that are high perform lower in their academics. There's an increased risk in adolescents for depression and anxiety when using marijuana. There is impaired driving when adolescents are using marijuana. And there is an exponential risk for addiction in adolescents when they're using marijuana because of where they are in their stages with brain development. So there will be products that will be very interesting to kids. Kids in our homes, they know what you have in a package, whether it's a cookie or a brownie or a gummy. Our kids are pretty sophisticated. No matter what the label says, this is coming. And, and it's here, as we've talked about, illegally. And so these impacts and these studies done by the CDC are solid. We know that this is what happens with our youth. So as your superintendent, I'm asking you to keep these products away from our kids. No matter what we do as a town, whether it's across the town line or in the town or over the town line at Abington, that's the beauty of the democratic process, and it's something that the town is going to have to wrestle with. I just need to make it as clear to anybody that's listening or thinking about this or watching. The piece of information that I provide to the democratic process is that our adolescents, our teenagers, their brains are race cars without brakes. They haven't developed yet. And the rates of addiction for people under the age who use are exponentially higher later in life because of the synaptic connections and the chasing highs that the brain is going to want to do later on. Underage drinking is not new, and alcohol's been restricted to people under the age of 21 for a long time. Underage smoking is not new. It's also not something that adolescents are allowed to do legally. Vaping is new, and vaping is rampant, folks. And so I know that we're going to be shouldering difficulties with this in schools, whether it's no matter where these shops are. The gentleman earlier said you can't legislate common sense. You can't. But perhaps what we can do is make it clear and make people aware that they need to keep this away from their children. And because I do know this, anecdotally from other states, kids are getting into these edibles on purpose and accidentally, and there are negative repercussions for it. So I want to thank you, and thank Rick for putting this together for people. And I'm available tonight or whenever to answer people's questions or help with this in any way I can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As Alex Bezanson mentioned, we have had a substance awareness coalition in the town for the past few years. We have a couple members with us tonight, and I'd like to invite them to come up to the microphone and share their thoughts for a moment or two.
Hi. My name's Elaine Brophy. I'm the current chairperson, president of the Abington Substance Awareness Coalition, and this is Charlene Simonetti, who is our treasurer. We've been in existence for close to 3 years, I believe, right now, and our main focus this year is to get into the schools and educate the kids. As Superintendent Schaefer said, vaping is huge right now, and that's the current crisis mode. I will say, for me as a parent and as part of the coalition, I have a lot of people I know that are in recovery, and I don't know one of them that didn't start with marijuana. It's not, I know there's other people who can handle it or whatever and just don't progress, but the vast majority do. And also the brain, the adolescent brain, there's a lot of damage that can be done by marijuana. Now you can say this is for people who are over 21. As we know with tobacco and alcohol, kids are going to get it. They do now. If it's available in the homes, my concern is what is modeled in their home environment. What's going to stop them from progressing? These are just some of the concerns that we have. It's not just the kids, it's also the adults. I don't know, from what I had heard, there really isn't very much in legislation for the police department in order to determine what is a high for a driving under the influence. I'm not sure exactly where we are with that right now. I didn't come here with facts. I only found out shortly before that I was going to be speaking. But I will tell you that those are our concerns. Don't know if Charlene wants to say anything.
My concerns are the same as Elaine, but I think from hearing tonight, it sounds to me like we're going more towards trying to gain a profit off of selling marijuana, and that's a huge concern for me. As Mr. Schaefer had said, my main concern, not as a parent, but being inside the schools, is what is this doing to, what is the message we're sending to the kids? Yeah, obviously alcohol and cigarettes have been around for a long time, but now we're legalizing marijuana, and there isn't a test that you can just, when you get pulled over, a couple of studies you said, but driving under the influence. So it's just, it makes me a little sick to think we're going to profit off of marijuana. And that's all I keep hearing is the numbers of how much money we're going to gain from this. That just doesn't really settle well with me. And it kind of goes back to the prescribing doctors and the overall problem we've been having with the pill prescribers and all these other things in the drug industry as it is now. What's really different from that? And that marijuana is not the gateway drug. Well, it is, and there's been a lot of studies, and like Mr. Schaefer had said, for the adolescent brain, it's not developed, and the edibles, the kids are getting into them, the vaping is a huge issue, so how is this really gonna not get into the hands of these young kids? And it only can be from 500 feet from a school. That's a huge concern, not that saying that that's what it would be, but how can you put a marijuana shop 500 feet from a school? That's insane. So as a coalition, we have a huge amount of concern with this, where we're trying to educate these students, don't do drugs, stay away from alcohol, but then we're legalizing marijuana, the drug that we're telling them not to do. I mean, we're contradicting ourselves.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm concerned that the cost is going to be more overall to our children, to mental health, and to the whole state of addiction. That's my concern as well. So that's it. That's mine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you can indulge me for one moment, there was a whole paragraph here on my sheet regarding the planning board's thought process in this that I failed to read. So if you'll indulge me for a moment. The thought process that went into this also involved taking a look at what's happening around us. Weymouth has said no, it is not going to be involved. Brockton has said yes. Rockland is undecided. Whitman has said no. East Bridgewater has said no. Braintree has said no. So depending on how you look at it, that's either a business opportunity or it's a sign that there are a lot of communities around us who don't want to take part in this. What we also take into consideration is the fact that there is a likelihood there is going to be delivery services, or that's when it's being discussed?
It will be discussed later, but there's no guarantee that
Okay. So there was a concern that you could still technically prohibit the retail sale in Abington, but it could be delivered into the town as part of a business model as well. So that went into the consideration about the planning board saying if we're going to have this, we should at least identify an area. And just to clarify one thing, in the zoning district that we have outlined for where this could be located, which is, again, in the industrial and high-tech districts, there is no schools or daycares within 500 feet of any of that property. So this would be well outside the boundary. Is there anyone from the Council on Aging here? Okay. Did you want to say anything or contribute anything?
We don't want it.
Okay. Could you just step up to the microphone just so people at home can hear? All right.
I don't know if I'm a representative of the Council on Aging, but we held a meeting last week.
2 weeks ago.
Whatever it was. And they were petrified when they had gone to a planning board meeting. There was quite a few homeowners when they were looking at the 123 district, the people on Green Street and that whole area over there and off of High Street and, even East Ashland, or Ashland, whatever that is. But anyway, they're afraid. We've seen these, that are even members of the COA and people that they know, even having it anywhere near their homes. Personally, I just don't want it. We've got to think of the kids first. This is about the kids. This is about the future of this town. We've really got to stop and think what's important. The most important thing in our town is our kids. I don't even have any. I just borrowed them doing that. But they're our future. They're going to be our town. Their children may be our town. Our town is 306 years old this year. And I think we really need to think of the roots that were set in and what's most important to us. And to me is, this is not something we need. It's not something our kids should be exposed to. It's not something that the teachers that teach them need to work with the kids that are exposed to it. You could go on and on and on. The seniors, they come from all areas of the town, not only just the senior housing. A lot of them live alone. They're frightened, they're scared of what's going on in the whole country and everywhere. And you bring something in that can alter a person's brain, alter their thinking, alter their driving, and we don't have a lot of these facts. We should all be thinking this is a very hurtful thing. And we need to protect our seniors, we need to protect our children, we need to protect their brains, okay, so that they can be, grow up to be thinking adults and stuff like that. So from the COA, I know that they are absolutely not for this at all, for themselves and, for the rest of the town.
Thank you very much. We have one more person I want to bring up quickly is Derek, who has, I think, an important voice we want to add to the discussion. He's just going to speak just for a moment.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Derek Quirk. I am a recovering drug addict and alcoholic and a resident of this town. And lots of good things I heard tonight, but the one thing that stuck out for me is, kind of like Charlene was talking about, we're really just looking at like a profit here. We're really profiting off people's drug use, call it recreational, call it what you want. At what expense do we need to really profit in that way? For me, I work in the field. I combat this opioid crisis that we all know about, and there's no way we can say we can regulate this thing and card people and all that. It all sounds great and the numbers look great on paper, but that's not, I'm definitely not for it. I have children that are growing up in this town. One is 8 years old and one is 1. And I just don't think, like, what kind of impression are we putting on our children? And, I'm not for it. I'm not for it. I appreciate everyone's view and input, but my personal opinion is absolutely not. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek. Appreciate it. So with the time we have left, I'd like to open the floor up to any other questions that we have. Anyone else that has a thought they want to share? But this would be a great opportunity where if you are uncertain about something or have a question, to get it answered while we have all these people in the same room. So I see Mr. Buckley.
Is there a third article on the warrant for continuation of the moratorium?
My understanding is that there is going to be an article. There had been conversations on the planning board about extending it 6 months. I think the Board of Selectmen is going to be proposing to extend it a year, which probably makes more sense, is my personal opinion, just to make sure that all the regulations have been written and are taking effect, and we can get an idea of how the implementation would be going in Massachusetts. Did I answer your question?
Is there an article?
There will be. I'll turn it over to the town council or our town manager as to where that currently stands in the process.
I'm instructed by town council that the planning board has the option at their public hearing to recommend it to the town meeting in May to extend it either 6 months or a year.
Okay.
So that will be up to the town meeting.
Very good.
It's on the warrant. Yes.
One other question, directed to Alex. I didn't watch the selectmen's meeting, but could you give to the group here and the cable audience the rationale the Board of Selectmen has used to file the article for a ban, given the fact that the town voted for to legalize retail marijuana with a 53.47%, not the state, the town?
That was what the selectmen decided to do, and it was at my suggestion, because like I said, I'm not sure 52% of the town of Abington wants it in Abington, although I think they want it in the state of Massachusetts. So the way other towns have been doing this is there's been articles to ban it, not articles to approve it, and we followed suit.
Well, we don't need an article to approve it. We don't do anything to approve FD.
That's my point.
But the question I have, I guess, is that if a special election is called for to endorse a ban that the town meeting has approved, then you're appealing to a much smaller electorate than you appeal to in a federal election.
I understand that, we discussed that also. So that's why I urge everyone to come out to town meeting. I still don't believe that 52% of the people that voted in 2016 want it in Abington. They may, but I'm not sure. I'm just not convinced of that. I think they want it legalized in Massachusetts, but nobody wants it in their backyard.
Any other questions, concerns, anything else that we can talk to before we wrap up for the evening? All right. So again, thank you very much to all of our speakers. I appreciate them coming out here on a wonderful night and spending it in here instead of outside doing something fun. Dates coming up to keep in mind, the first Monday in May, and I wish I had my calendar with me, it's either the 7th or the 8th. I think it's the 7th. The planning board will be holding another public hearing to talk about potential zoning changes, and this will again be discussed as part of the public hearing formal process. Another opportunity to weigh in and have a conversation about this topic. And town meeting is on May 21st. I would encourage everyone to get babysitters, cancel Little League, do everything they can to make sure they attend town meeting. There's a lot of interesting topics. This is just one of them. And it's, again, very important to have your voice heard. For anyone watching this in the next 48 hours, town elections are this Saturday. Please go out and vote. Again, thank you for everyone for coming out tonight, and for everyone watching at home, thank you very much. And we'll see you at town meeting. Thank you.